Hope we're all doing well today. Want to apologize. It is really, really bright still. So it's going to be probably bright here for a minute. But the sun's going down, so. But I hope you're doing well. New Zealand fam, how are you doing? Kara Docs Rift, I hope you're doing well. It is always good to see you. Hey, Nate, how's it going? How are you, son? Really good to see you. How was your day? How was your day? Happy Monday to you, son. We're currently reading the John Carter of Mars series. I don't know if you're familiar. Hope you're sticking around for the story. As is tradition, we just solve some cubes. Hello, Kev, Nate, Kara, and a special hello to my New Zealand fam. And how are you doing tonight, Brangus? It's always good to see you, brother. Raphilosophy, I hope you're doing well. Listening with Nana, excellent. I hope she is doing well. I appreciate the updates. I know. I have no. It's the desert, man. Because daylight saving time happens, our clocks don't change. So we start seeing the sun like 7 o'clock at night. Going great. It was good. Was studying for finals, but right now resorting my Yamask collection. Finished an updated spreadsheet for my collection list. Let's go. As usual, got you playing on my Switch. Can't chat for these reading streams. It's perfect. No worries at all. Appreciate you. Appreciate you, CK. I'm doing. Just started to get relief with the back. Let's go. I love that. I love that, Brangus. Any kind of relief that you can get with that, I'm all for it. So I decided to challenge myself, y'all, today, and I was able to get the 5x5 done in, say, 10 minutes. And so I figured that's kind of perfect because I always excuse me, I always give us 10 minutes before we get started, so I'm going to try and do this as quick as I possibly can. And Nate, it's been a minute since we talked about Rubik's Cube, but are you still keeping up with it? Papa Ghost saying hi to Nate. Hey, Roxanne. Fran also doesn't do daylight savings time? Let's go. I'm glad we're not the only ones. I think there's a couple other states that don't. I just cannot recall for the life of me. No time to mess up. That. Do that. That was way too easy. Okay, that'll work. Right over here. Indiana does not. Hello, how are you, Sean Bowden? It is always good to see you. How was your day? Papa Ghost. Everyone, I've been trying to keep up with the cube every now and then. And that's all you can really do. Is just keep up with it every now and then. I don't like this at all here. Something happened. Let's just put it all back real quick. Red, blue, yellow, white. Here we go. Let's get our last two centers in. Let's go this way. That. Looked like I wanted it to. Kind of put me right back. Keep going back. Sorry, y'all. Give me a second. Good. Also, all good. Decided to move y'all mass collection to a bigger binder once I realized how many cards I really needed, right? Nick. Talk about it before, but my favorite thing I pulled out of that book pickup you saw on the shorts was 10 classic manga called Dragon Knights, with 7 out of the 10 being hardback. Let's go. And good to see you, Nick. I hope you're doing wonderful today. We're just going to give this what I thought was going to be a quick solve. That center really stumped me. Guess it's been a Monday indeed. Show me to start with the big cubes. But let me know how you are today. Oh, there it is. It's been about 6 minutes. Cool. I like to time myself and get this done in under 10 is what I'm really trying to do. Well, 10 or under, I should say. This one. And then I think I'm ready to take on the 7x7. But as I mentioned, I think I'm done with the cubes after that as far as going up in size, because otherwise it's just becoming just too long to do it quick. So it'd be fun to challenge myself on the first 7 and then kind of just go from there. Let's find the orange and blue. It's right there. You need to make sure to have 4 spots for special gifts from coming. It needs to make a square. You need to make sure to leave 4 spots for special gift coming. It needs to make a square. Special gift coming. Oh, I got you. Is that for Brother Nat? Okay. Green and yellow. Bam. That's that right there. Green. Appreciate you all coming on in, getting ready. I would grab your favorite beverage of choice, take a little stretch, get comfy, as we're going to get into more of the John Carter series. It got really exciting last time. We'll see what happens this time. I know that I was happy where we stopped because it wasn't so much a cliffhanger, which are fine, but I don't read ahead, so just so you guys know, I like to be as surprised at what happens as you all. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And no worries at all. Just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Okay. here. Right. Notice there was quite a few people on and streaming tonight that don't normally pop on and stream. This. So it might be a little slow night, but that's okay. All right. Right. Ooh, I really want a magnetic 5x5 though. I think that would help my times a whole lot. This out. That should be it. That is it. Cool. Don't think I made that in my time I was looking to make. Nope, 12 minutes. Oh well. Try and get DPM. Oh, I never thought about it. Never thought about it. I'm gonna take a quick break. Do you have an apple you understand? Late for me, okay? Coco, I learned that from the master herself, Nana Katrina. Let's go. Yeah, I never even thought about the DPM raid. Oh well. And a cheeky one too, I bet. He's a powerhouse. And wear him down. You go and rest. You go and rest. Appreciate you. Hope you rest up. And yes, we will entertain indeed. Let's get into a story. And thanks for letting me do that. Appreciate it. And Nate, if you want to keep going on it, I will definitely teach you everything that I know. Whether that be during or after stream, send your screenshot on the new layout for the collection list. Ooh. Nice. Excellent. I like it. I'll review it a little bit later and I'll see if any have come my way. But that is very well organized. I like it. Just getting the book up, and we are going to start, I believe, it's going to be chapter 16. Oh, chapter 11. That's right, chapter 11, because this is our third stream of the book. Chapter 11. When hell broke loose. That's right. All right, let me wet the whistle. And I hope you all enjoy as the sun goes down and we get lost in Mars. Chapter 11. When hell broke loose. Early the next morning, Zodar and I commenced work upon our plane's first gate. First, I had him sketch upon the stone floor of our cell as accurate a map with the south polar regions as was possible, with the crude instruments at our disposal, a buckle from my harness, and the sharp edge of the wondrous gem that I had taken from Satar Throng. From this, I computed the general direction of helium and the distance at which it lay from the opening which led to Omine. Then I had him draw a map of Omine, indicating plainly the position of Shador, and of the opening of the dome which led to our outer world. These I studied until they were indelibly imprinted on my memory. From Zodar I learned the duties and customs of the guards who patrolled Shador, and seemed that during the hours set aside for sleep only one man was on duty at a time. He paced a beat that passed around the prison at a distance of about 100 feet from the building. The pace of the sentries, Zodar said, was very slow, requiring nearly 10 minutes to make a single round. This meant that for particularly 5 minutes at a time each side of the prison was unguarded, as the sentry pursued his snail-like pace upon the opposite side. "This information, you ask," said Zodar, "will be all very valuable after we get out, but nothing that you have asked has any bearing on that first and most important consideration." "We will get out all right," I replied, laughing. "Leave that to me." "When shall we make the attempt?" he asked. The first night that finds a small craft moored near the shore of Shador," I replied. "But how will you know that any craft is moored near Shador?" "The windows are far beyond our reach." "Not so, friend Zodar. Look." With a bound, I sprang up to the bars of our window opposite us and took a quick survey of the scene without. Several small craft with 2 large battleships lay within 100 yards of Shador. "Tonight," I thought, and was just about to voice my decision to Zodar when, without warning, the door of our prison opened and the guard stepped in. If the fellow saw me, our chances of escape might quickly go gleaming, for I knew that they would put me in the irons if they had the slightest conception of my wonderful agility which my earthly muscles gave me upon Mars. The man had entered and was standing facing the center of the room so that his back was towards me. 5 feet above me was the top of a partition wall separating our cell from the next. There was my only chance to escape detection. If the fellow turned, I was lost. Nor could I have dropped to the floor undetected, since he was so nearly below me, that I would have struck him had I done so. "Where is the white man?" cried the guard of Zodar. "Isis commands his presence." He started to turn to see if there was another part of the cell. I scrambled up the iron grating of the window until I could catch a good footing on the sill with one foot, and then let go of my hold and sprang up for the partition top. "What was that?" I heard a deep voice of the black bellow as my metal grated against the stone wall as I slipped over. Then I dropped lightly to the floor of the cell beyond. "Where's the white slave?" again cried the guard. I know not," replied Zodar. "He was here even as you entered. I'm not his keeper. Go find him." The black grumbled something that I could not understand, and then I heard him unlocking the door into one side of the other cells on the farther side. Listening intently, I caught the sound as the door closed behind him. Then I sprang once more to the top of the partition and dropped into my own cell beside the astonished Zodar. "Do you see now how we will escape?" I asked him in a whisper. "I see how you may," he replied, "but I am no wiser than before as to how I am to pass these walls. Certain as it is, I cannot bounce over them as you do." We heard the guard moving about from cell to cell, and finally, his rounds completed, he again entered ours. When his eyes fell upon me, they fairly bulged from his head. "By the shell of my first ancestor," he roared, "where have you been?" "I've been in prison since you put me here yesterday," I answered. "I was in this room when you entered. You had better look at your eyesight." He glared at me with mingled rage and relief. "Come," he said, "Isis commands your presence." He conducted me outside the prison, leaving Zodar behind. There we found several other guards, and with them the red Martian youth who occupied another cell upon Shador. The journey I had taken to the temple of Isis on that preceding day was repeated. The guards kept the red boy and myself separated, so that we had no opportunity to continue the conversation that had been interrupted the previous night. The youth's face had haunted me. Where had I seen him before? There was something strangely familiar in every line of him, in his carriage, his manner of speaking, his gestures. I could have sworn that I knew him, and yet I knew, too, that I had never seen him before. When we reached the gardens of Isis, we were led away from the temples instead of towards it, the way round through enchanted parks to a mighty wall that towered 100 feet in the air. Massive gates gave egress upon the small plain, surrounded by the same gorgeous forest that I had seen at the foot of the Golden Cliffs. Crowds of blacks were strolling in the same direction that our guard were leading us, and with them mingled my old friends, the plant men and the white apes. The brutal beasts moved among them, the crowd as pet dogs might. If they were in the way of the blacks, pushed them roughly to one side or whacked them with the flat of their sword, and the animals slunk away as in great fear. Presently, we came upon our destination, a great amphitheater, situated at the further edge of the plain, and about half a mile beyond the garden wall. Through a massive arched gateway, the blacks poured in to take their seats, while our guard led us to a smaller entrance near one end of the structure. Through this we passed into the enclosure beneath the seats, where we found a number of other prisoners herded together under guard. Some of them were in irons, but for the most part they seemed sufficiently awed by the presence of their guard to preclude any possibility of attempted escape. During the trip from Shador, I had had no opportunity to talk with my fellow prisoner, but now that we were safely within the barred paddock, our guards abated their watchfulness, with the result that I found myself able to approach the red Martian youth from whom I felt such a strange attraction. "What is the object of this assembly?" I asked him. "Are we to fight for the edification of the firstborn, or is that something worse than that?" It is part of the monthly rites of issues," he replied, "in which black men wash the sins from their souls in the blood of men from outer world. If perchance the black is killed, it is evidence of his disloyal to Isis and unpardonable sin. If he lives through the contest, he is held acquitted of his charge that forced the sentence of the rites, as it is called upon him. The forms of combat vary. A number of us may be pitted together against an equal number or twice the number of blacks, or singly we may be set forth to face wild beasts or some famous black warrior." "And if we are victorious?" I asked. "What then, freedom?" He laughed. "Freedom, forsooth. And only freedom for us, death. None who enters the domains of the firstborn ever leave. If we prove able fighters, we are permitted to fight often. If we are not mighty fighters, sooner or later, we die in the arena." "And you have fought often?" I asked. "Very often," he replied. "It is my only pleasure. Some 100 black devils have accounted for I accounted for during nearly a year of the rites of Isis. My mother would be very proud, could she only know how well I have maintained my traditions of my father's prowess." "Your father must have been a mighty warrior," I said. "I have known most of the warriors of Barsoom in my time. Doubtless I knew him. Who was he?" My father was, "Come, Callets!" I heard a rough voice of the guard. "To the slaughter with you." And roughly we were hustled into the steep incline that led to the chambers far below, which led out upon the arena. The amphitheater, like all I had ever seen upon Barsoom, was built in a large excavation. Only the highest seats, which formed the low wall surrounded the pit, were above the level of the ground. The arena itself was far below the surface. Just beneath the lower tiers of seats was a series of barred cages, on a level with the surface of the arena. Into these we were herded, but unfortunately my youthful friend was not of those who occupied a cage with me. Directly opposite my cage was a throne of Isis. There the horrid creature squatted, surrounded by 100 slave maidens, sparkling in jeweled trappings. Brilliant cloths of many hues and strange patterns formed the soft cushion covering of the dais upon which they reclined about her. On 4 sides of the throne, and several feet below it, stood 3 solid ranks of heavily armed soldiery. Elbow to elbow in front of these were the high dignitaries of this mock heaven, gleaming blacks bedecked with precious stones upon their foreheads and insignia of their rank set in circles of gold. On both sides of the throne stretched a solid mass of humanity from top to bottom of the amphitheater. There were as many women as men, and each were clothed in the wondrously wrought harness of his station and of his house. With each black was from 1 to 3 slaves drawn from the domains of the Therns and from the outer world. And from the outer world. The blacks are all noble. There is no peasantry among the firstborn. Even the lowest soldier is a god, and has his slaves to wait upon him. The firstborn do not work. The men fight. That is a sacred privilege and duty, to fight and die for Isis. The women do nothing, absolutely nothing. Slaves wash them, slaves dress them, slaves feed them. There are some even who have slaves that talk for them, and I saw one who sat during the rites with closed eyes while a slave narrated to her the events that were transpiring within the arena. The first event of the day was the tribute to Isis. It marked the end of those poor unfortunates who had looked upon the divinative glory of the goddess a full year before. There were 10 of them, splendid beauties from the proud courts of mighty Jeddaks and from the temples of the holy Therns. For a year they had served in the retinue of Isis. Today they were to pay the price of this divine preferment with their lives. Tomorrow they would grace the tables of the court functionaries. A huge black entered the arena with a young woman. Carefully he inspected them, felt of their limbs, and poked them in the ribs. Presently he selected one of their number, whom he led before the throne of Isis, and addressed some words to the goddess which I could not hear. Isis nodded her head. The black raised his hand above his head in a token of salute, grasped the girl by the wrist, and dragged her from the arena through a small doorway below the throne. "Isis will dine well tonight," said a prisoner beside me. "What do you mean?" I asked. That was her dinner, that old Thabis. That was her dinner that old Thabis is taking to the kitchen. Didst not note how carefully he selected the plumpest and tenderest of the lot? I growled out my curses and a monster sitting opposite us on the gorgeous throne. "Fume not," admonished my companion. "You will see far worse than that if you live even a month among the firstborn." I turned again in time to see the gate of a nearby cage thrown open and 3 monstrous white apes spring into the arena. The girls shrank in fear and grouped in the center of the enclosure. One was on her knees and imploring hands outstretched towards Isis, but the hideous deity only leaned further forward in keener anticipation of the entertainment to come. At length the apes spied and huddled knot of terror-stricken maidens with the demoniacal shrieks of bestial frenzy charged upon them. A wave of mad fury surged over me, a cruel cowardliness of the power-drunk creature whose malignant mind conceived such frightful forms of torture stirred to their utmost depths of my resentment and my manhood. The blood-red haze that presaged death to my foes swam before my eyes. The guard lolled before the unbarred gate of the cage which confined me. What need of bars, indeed, to keep those poor victims from rushing into the arena, with the edict of the gods had appointed as their death place? A single blow sent the black unconscious to the ground. Snatching up his long sword, I sprang into the arena. The apes were almost upon the maidens, but a couple of mighty bounds were all my earthly muscles required to carry me to the center of the sand-strewn floor. For an instant silence reigned in the great amphitheater. Then a wild shout arose from the cages of the doomed. My long sword circled whirring through the air, and the great ape sprawled headless at the feet of the fainting girls. The other apes turned now upon me, and as I stood facing them, a sullen roar from the audience answered the wild cheers from the cages. From the tail of my eye I saw a score of guards rushing across the glistening sand toward me. Then a figure broke out from one of the cages behind them. It was the youth whose personality had fascinated me. He paused a moment before the cages with upraised sword. "Come, men of the outer world," he shouted, "let us make our deaths worthwhile, and at the back of this unknown warrior turn this day tribute to Isis into an orgy of revenge that will echo through the ages and cause black skins to blanch at the repetition of the rites of Isis. Come! The racks without your cages are filled with blades." Without waiting to note the outcome of his plea, he turned and bounded toward me. From every cage that harbored red men, and thunderous shout went up in answer to his Exhortation. The inner guards went down beneath howling mobs, and the cages vomited forth their inmates hot with the lust to kill. The racks that stood without were stripped of the swords with which the prisoners were to have been armed to enter their allotted combats, and a swarm of determined warriors sped to our support. The great apes, towering in all their 15 feet in height, and gone down before my sword while the charging guards were still some distance away. Close behind them pursued the youth. At my back were the young girls, and as it was in their service that I fought, I remained standing there to meet my inevitable death, but with the determination to give such an account of myself as would long be remembered in the land of the firstborn. I noted the marvelous speed of the young red man as he raced after the guards. Never had I seen such speed in a Martian. His leaps and bounds were little short of those which my earthly muscles had produced to create such awe and respect on the part of the green Martians, into whose hands I had fallen on that long given day and had seen my first advent upon Mars. The guards had not reached me when he fell upon them from the rear, and as they turned, thinking from the fierceness of his onslaught that a dozen were attacking them, I rushed them from my side. In a rapid fighting that followed, I had a little chance to note aught else than the movements of my immediate adversaries, but now and again I caught a fleeting glimpse of the purring sword and the lightly springing figure of sinewy steel that filled my heart with a strange yearning and a mighty but unaccountable pride. On the handsome face of the boy a grim smile played, and ever and anon he threw the taunting challenge to the foes that faced him, and in this and other ways his manners of fighting was similar to that which had always marked me upon the field of combat. Perhaps it was this vague likeness which made me love the boy, while the awful havoc that his sword played along the blacks filled my soul with the tremendous respect for him. For my part, I was fighting as I had fought 1,000 times before, now sidestepping a wicked thrust, now stepping quickly in to let my sword's point drink deep of the foeman's heart before it buried itself in the throat of his companion. We were having a merry time of it, we two, when a great body of Issa's own guards were ordered into the arena. On they came with fierce cries, while from every side the armed prisoners swarmed upon them. For half an hour it was as all hell had broken loose. In the walled confines of the arena we fought in the inextricable mass, howling, cursing, blood-streaked demons, and ever the sword of the young red men flashed beside me. Slowly, and by repeated commands, I had succeeded in drawing the prisoners into a rough formation about us, so that at last we fought formed into a rude circle, in the center of which were the doomed maids. Many had gone down on both sides, but by far the greater havoc had been wrought in the ranks of the guards of Isis. I could see messengers running swiftly through the audience, and as they passed, their nobles their unsheathed swords and sprang into the arena. They were going to annihilate us by force of numbers. That was quite evidently their plan. I caught a glimpse of Isis leaning far forward upon her throne, her hideous countenance distorted in a horrid grimace of hate and rage, in which I thought I could distinguish an expression of fear. It was that face that inspired me to the thing that followed. Quickly I ordered 50 of the prisoners to drop back behind us and form a new circle around the maidens. "Remain and protect them until I return," I commanded. Then turning to those who formed the outer line, I cried, "Down with Isis! Follow me to the thrones. We will reap vengeance where vengeance is deserved." The youth at my side was the first to take up the cry of "Down with Isis!" And then at my back and from all sides rose the hoarse shout of "To the throne! To the throne!" As one man we moved, an irresistible fighting mass over the bodies of the dead and the dying foes of the gorgeous throne of the Martian's deity. Hordes of the doughtiest fighting men of the firstborn poured from the audience to check our progress. We mowed them down before us as they had been papermen. "To the seats, some of you!" I cried as we approached the arena's barrier wall. 10 of us can take the throne." For I had seen that Isis's guards had for the most part entered the fray within the arena. On both sides of me the prisoners broke to the left and to the right for the seats, vaulting to the low wall and dripping swords lusting for the crowded victims who awaited them. In another moment, the entire amphitheater was filled with the shrieks of the dying and the wounded, mingled with the clash of arms and triumphant shouts of the victors. Side by side, the young red men and I, with perhaps a dozen others, fought our way to the foot of the throne. The remaining guards, enforced by the high dignitaries and nobles of the firstborn, closed in behind us, and Isis, who sat leaning far forward upon her carved Sorapis bench, now screaming high-pitched commands to her following, now hurling blighting curses upon those who had sought to desecrate her godhood. The frightened slaves about her trembled in wide-eyed expectancy, knowing not whether to pray to our victory or our defeat. Several among them, proud daughters no doubt of some of Barsoom's noblest warriors, snatched swords from the hands of the fallen and fell upon the guards of Isis. But they were soon cut down, glorious martyrs to the hopeless cause. The men that fought with us fought well, but never since Tarkas and I fought out that long, hot afternoon, shoulder to shoulder against the hordes of Warhoon in the Dead Sea bottom before the Thark, had I seen two men fight with such good purpose and with such unconquerable ferocity as the young red man and I fought that day before the throne of Isis, goddess of death and the life eternal. Man by man, those who stood between us and the caravanserais wood bench went down before our blades. Others swarmed in to fill the breach, but inch by inch, foot by foot, we won nearer and nearer to our goal. Presently a cry went up from the section of the stands nearby, "Rise, slaves! Rise, slaves!" It rose and fell until it swelled into a mighty volume of sound that swept in great billows around the entire amphitheater. For an instant, as though by common assent, we ceased our fighting to look for a meaning of this new note, nor did it take but a moment to translate its significance. In all parts of the structure, the female slaves were falling upon their masters with whatever weapon came first to hand. A dagger snatched from a harness of her mistress was waved aloft by some fair slave, its shimmering blade crimson with the lifeblood of its owner. Swords plucked from the bodies of the dead about them, heavy ornaments, and which could be turned into bludgeons. Such were the implements with which these fair women wreaked the long-pent vengeance which at best could not partially recompense them for the unspeakable cruelties and indignities with which their black masters had heaped upon them, and those who could find no other weapons used their strong fingers and their gleaming teeth. It was at once a sight to make one shudder and to cheer, but in a brief second we were engaged once more in our own battle, with only the unquenchable battle cry of the women to remind us that they still fought. "Rise, slaves! Rise, slaves!" Only a single thin rank of men now stood between us and Isis. Her face was blue with terror. Foam flecked her lips. She seemed too paralyzed with fear to move. Only the youth and I fought now. The others had fallen, and I was like to have gone down too from a nasty longsword cut had not a hand reached out from behind my adversary and clutched his elbow as the blade was falling upon me. The youth sprang to my side and ran his sword through the fellow before he could recover to deliver another blow. I should have died even then, but for that, as my sword was tight wedged in the breastbone of the dater of the firstborn. As a fellow went down, I snatched his sword from him, and over his prostrate body looked into the eyes of the one whose quick hand had saved me from the first cut of his sword, and it was Feodor, daughter of Matashang. "Fly, my prince," she cried. "It is useless to fight them longer. All within the arena are dead. All who charged the throne are dead, but you and this youth. Only among the seats are there left any of your fighting men, and there the slave women are fast being cut down. Listen! You can scarce hear the battle cries of women now, for nearly all are dead. For each one of you there were 10,000 blacks within the domains of the firstborn. Break for the open and the sea of Chorus. With your mighty sword arm you may yet win to the golden cliffs and the templed gardens of the holy Therans. There tell your story to my Taishang, my father. He will keep you, and together you may find a way to rescue me. Fly, while there is yet bare chance to fly." But that was not my mission, nor could I see much to be preferred in the cruel hospitality of the holy Therans to that of the firstborn. "Down with Isis!" I shouted, and together the boy and I took up back into the fight once more, and two blacks went down with our swords in their vitals, and we stood face to face with Isis as my sword went up to end her horrid career in Paralysis left her, and with an ear-piercing shriek, she turned to flee. Directly behind her, a black gulf suddenly yawned in the flooring of the dais. She sprang for the opening, with the youth and I close at her heels. Her scattered guard rallied at her cry and rushed for us. A blow fell upon the head of the youth. He staggered and would have fallen, but I caught him in my left arm and turned to face the infuriated mob of religious fanatics crazed by the affront I had put upon their goddess, just as Isis disappeared into the black depths beneath me. Whew! How's that for a chapter? Hello! No worries at all. Please be safe. Hey, thanks, Longor. Appreciate it. Purple Moon! Good to see you. JB's Pokey Stop. Good to see you. Put you on the TV. We'll keep the phone with me and need to set a point. No worries at all. Pogios Love Forever. Appreciate that, JB. 7 months in the Spirit Clan. Right? That was intense. Like, they weren't lying. That was a that was a right name for a chapter, because certainly all hell broke loose. Anybody have any theories on the red kid? Who isn't Papa Ghost? I mean, they're almost painting it out for us, so. But yeah, that's a good story so far. I'm loving it, Kara. Love it. Appreciate you. He could possibly be Nate. So when they do describe people in colors, that's because there are different Martians on Mars. And some are black, some are green, some are red. So that's funny, Nate. He could possibly be red, the little red Martian boy. All right. Ooh, this one's pretty interesting as well. Let's get into chapter 12. Doomed to Die. For an instant, I stood there before they fell upon me, but the first rush of them forced me back a step or two. My foot felt for the floor, but found only an empty space. I had backed into a pit which had received Isis. For a second, I toppled there upon the brink. Then I too, with the boy still tightly clutched in my arms, pitched forward into the black abyss. We struck a polished chute. An opening above us closed as magically as it had opened, and we shot down unharmed into a dimly lit apartment far below the arena. As I rose to my feet, the first thing I saw was a malignant countenance of Isis glaring at me through the heavy bars of a grated door at one side of the chamber. "Rash mortals," she shrilled. "You shall pay the awful penalty for your blasphemy in this secret cell. Here you shall lie alone in the darkness with this carcass of your accomplice festering in its rottenness by your side, until crazed by loneliness and hunger you feed upon that crawling maggots that were once a man." That was all. In another instant she was gone, and the dim light which had filled the cell faded to a crimarium blackness. "Pleasant old lady," said a voice at my side. "Who speaks?" I asked. "'Tis I, your companion, who has had the honor this day of fighting shoulder to shoulder with the greatest warrior that ever wore metal upon Barsoom." "I thank God that you are not dead," I said. "I feared that nasty cut upon your head." "It but stunned me," he replied. "A mere scratch." Maybe it were as well had it been final," I said. "We seem to be in a pretty fix here, with a splendid chance of dying of starvation and thirst." "Where are we?" "Beneath the arena," I replied. "We tumbled down the shaft that swallowed Isis, and she was almost at our mercy." He laughed a low laugh of pleasure and relief, and then reaching out through the inky blackness, he sought my shoulder and pulled my ear close to his mouth. "Nothing could be better," he whispered. "There are secrets within the secrets of Isis in which Isis herself does not dream." "What do you mean?" "I labored with the other slaves a year since in the remodeling of these subterranean galleries, and at the time we found below these an ancient system of corridors and chambers that had been sealed up for ages. The blacks in charge of the work explored them, taking several of us along to do whatever work there might be occasion for. I know the entire system perfectly. There are miles of corridors, honeycombing the ground beneath the gardens and the temple itself, and there is one passage that leads down and connects with the lower regions that open on the water shaft that gives passage to Omin. If we can reach the submarine undetected, we may yet make the sea in which there are many islands where the blacks never go. There we may live for a time, and who knows what may transpire to aid us to escape. He had spoken all in low whisper, evidently fearing spying ears even here, and so I answered him in the same subdued tone. Lead back to Shador, my friend, I whispered. Zodar the Black is there. We were attempt our great escape together, so I cannot desert him. No, said the boy. One cannot desert a friend. It were better to be recaptured ourselves than that. Then he commenced groping his way about the floor of the dark chamber, searching for the trap that led to the corridors beneath. At length he summoned me by a low tsk, 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 and I crept towards the sound of his voice to keep from kneeling on the brink of an opening in the door. There is a drop here of about 10 feet, he whispered. Hang by your hands and you will alight safely to the level floor of the soft sand. Very quietly I lowered myself from the inky cell above to the inky pit below. So utterly dark was it that we could not see our hands at an inch from our noses. Never, I think, have I known such complete absence of light as existed in the pits of Isis. For an instant I hung in midair. There is a strange sensation connected with the experience of that nature which is quite difficult to describe. When the feet tread empty air at the distance below is shrouded in darkness, there is this feeling akin to panic at the thought of releasing the hold and taking the plunge into unknown depths. Although the boy had told me that it was but 10 feet to the floor below, I experienced the same thrills as though I were hanging above a bottomless pit. Then I released my hold and dropped 4 feet to the soft cushion of sand. The boy followed me. Raise me to your shoulders, he said, and it will replace the trap. And I will replace the trap. This done, he took me by the hand, leading me very slowly, with much feeling about and frequent halts to assure him that he did not stray into the wrong passageways. Presently, we commenced the distance of a very steep incline. It will not be long, he said, before we shall have light. At the lower levels, we meet the same strata of phosphorescent rock that illuminates Omin. Never shall I forget that trip through the pits of Isis. While it was devoid of important incidents, yet it was filled for me with a strange charm of excitement and adventure, which I think I must have hinged principally on the unguessable antiquity of these long-forgotten corridors. The things, with the Stygian darkness hid from my objective eye, could not have been half so wonderful as the pictures which my imagination wrought, as it conjured to life again the ancient peoples of this dying world, and set them once more to the labors and intrigues and mysteries and the cruelties which they had practiced to make their last stand against the swarming hordes of the Dead Sea bottoms that had driven them step by step to the uttermost pinnacle of the world, where they are now entrenched behind an impenetrable barrier of superstition. In addition to the green men, there had been 3 principal races upon Barsoom: the blacks, the whites, and the race of yellow men. As the waters of the planet dried and the seas receded, all other resources dwindled until life upon the planet became a constant battle for survival. The various races had made their war upon one another for ages, and the 3 higher types had easily bested the green savages of the water places of the world. And now that the receding seas necessitated constant abandonment of their forfeited cities and forced upon them a more or less nomadic life in which they became separated into smaller communities, they soon fell prey to the fierce hordes of green men. The result was the partial amalgamation of the blacks, whites, and yellows, the result of which is shown in the present splendid race of red men. I had always supposed that all traces of the original races had disappeared from the face of Mars, yet within the past 4 days I had found both whites and blacks, and in great multitudes. Could it be possible that in some far-off corner of the planet there still existed a remnant of the ancient race of yellow men? My reveries were broken in upon my low exclamation from the boy. "At last, the lighted way!" he cried, and looked up. I beheld a long distance before us a dim radiance. As we advanced, the light increased until presently we emerged into well-lit passageways. From then on, our progress was rapid until we came suddenly to the end of the corridor and let directly upon the ledge surrounding the pool of the submarine. The craft lay at her moorings in undiscovered hatch. Raising his finger to his lips and then tapping his sword in a significant manner, the youth crept noiselessly toward the vessel. I was close at his heels. Silently, we dropped to the deserted deck, and on hands and knees we crawled toward the hatchway. A stealthy glance below revealed no guard in sight, and so, with the quickness and the soundlessness of cats, we dropped together into the main cabin of the submarine. Even here was no sign of life. Quickly, we covered and secured the hatch. Then the boy stepped into the pilot's house and touched a button, and the boat sank amid swirling waters toward the bottom of the shaft. Even then, there was no scurrying of feet as we had expected, and while the boy remained to direct the boat, I slid from cabin to cabin in futile search for some member of the crew. The craft was entirely deserted. Such good fortune seemed almost unbelievable. When I returned to the pilot house to report the good news to my companion, he handed me a paper. "This may explain the absence of the crew," he said. It was a radio aerial message to the commander of the new submarine. "The slaves have risen. Come with what men you have and those that you can gather on the way. Too late to get aid from Omin. They are all massacring all within the amphitheater. Isis has threatened haste. Zitad." "Zitad is Dator of the guards of Isis," explained the youth. "We gave him a bad scar, the one they will not soon forget. We gave them a bad scare, one they will not soon forget." "Let us hope that is but the beginning of the end of Isis," I said. "Only our first ancestor knows," he replied. We reached the submarine pool in Omin without incident. Here we debated the wisdom of sinking the craft before leaving her, but finally decided that it would add nothing to our chances for escape. There were plenty of blacks on Omin to thwart us were we apprehended. However, many more might come from the temples and gardens of Isis, would not in any decrease our chances. We were now in the quandary as to how to pass the guards who patrolled the island about the pool. At last I hit upon a plan. "What is the name or title of an officer in charge of these guards?" I asked the boy. "A fellow named Torith was on duty when we entered this morning," he replied. "Good. And what is the name of the commander of the submarine?" "Yearsted." I found a dispatch blank in the cabin and wrote the following order. "Datar Torith, return these 2 slaves at once to Shador. Yearsted." "That will be a simpler way to return," I said, smiling as I handed the forged order to the boy. "Come, we shall now see how well it works." "But our swords," he exclaimed. "What shall we say to explain them?" "Since we cannot explain them, we shall have to leave them behind us," I replied. "It is not the extreme of rashness to thus put ourselves again unarmed in the power of the firstborn?" "It is the only way," I answered. "You may trust me to find a way out of the prison of Shador, and I think, once out, that we shall find no great difficulty in arming ourselves once more in the country, which abounds so plentifully in armed men." "As you say," he replied with a smile and shrug. "I cannot follow another leader who inspired greater confidence than you. Come, let us put your ruse to the test." Boldly, we emerged from the hatchway of the craft, leaving our swords behind us, and strode to the main exit, which led to the sentry's post and the office of the Dator of the guard. At sight of us, the members of the guard sprang forward in surprise, and with leveled rifles halted us. I held out the message to one of them. He took it, and seeing to whom it was addressed, turned and handed it to Torith, who was emerging from his office to learn the cause of the commotion. The black read the order, and for a moment eyed us with evident suspicion. "Where is Dator Yearsted?" he asked, and my heart sank within me, as I cursed myself for a stupid fool in not having sunk the submarine to make a good lie that I must tell. His orders to return immediately to the temple landing, I replied. Torth took a half step toward the entrance to the pool as though to corroborate my story. For that instant, everything hung in the balance. For he had done so and found the empty submarine still lying in her wharf, the whole weak fabric of my concoction would have tumbled about our heads. But evidently he decided the message must be genuine, nor indeed was there any good reason to doubt it, since it would scarce have seemed credible to him that two slaves would voluntarily be giving themselves into custody in any such matter as this. It was the very boldness of the plan which rendered it successful. "Were you connected with the rising of the slaves?" asked Torith. "We have just had a menagerie of reports to some such event." "All were involved," I replied, "but it amounted to little. The guards quickly overcame and killed the majority of us." He seemed satisfied with this reply. "Take them to Shador," he ordered, turning to one of his subordinates. We entered a small boat lying beside the island. In a few minutes we were disembarking upon Shador. Here we were returned to our respective cells, I with Zodar and the boy by himself, and behind locked doors we were again prisoners of the firstborn. How weird did they make the first two chapters suddenly irrelevant in the third one? Maddie! Have a great night. I had to sit through plus an 18 bike. Trying to lip read, Kev. That's funny. You know you can turn on closed captions so you can read it with me. Oh, your phone's about to die. That's right. I hope you have a good night. It's funny. First two chapters put us right back in the prison. Heavy D, how you doing? It's good to see you. All right, we're gonna attempt to get through chapter 15 tonight. Just at about the hour mark. I think we're making pretty good time. Hope you all are enjoying the story as much as I am. And now we're going to get back to the plan as we start chapter 13, which is A Break for Liberty. Zodar listened in incredulous astonishment to my narration of the events which had transpired within the arena at the rites of Isis. He could scarce conceive, even though he had already professed his doubt as to the deity of Isis, that one could threaten her with a sword in hand and not be blasted into 1,000 fragments by the mere fury of her divine wrath. "It is the final proof," he said, at last. "No more is needed to completely shatter the last remnant of my superstitious belief in the divinity of Isis. She is only a wicked old woman, wielding a mighty power for evil throughout machinations that have kept her own people of all Barsoom in religious ignorance for ages." "She is still all-powerful here, however," I replied, "so it behooves us to leave at first moment that appears at it behooves us to leave at the first moment that appears at all propitious." "I hope that you may find a propitious moment," he said with a laugh, "for it is certain that all in my life I had never seen one in which a prisoner of the firstborn might escape. Tonight will do as any," I replied. "It will soon be night," said Zodar. "How may I aid in the adventure?" "Can you swim?" I asked him. "No slimy Scythian that haunts the depths of Chorus is more at home in water than is Zodar," he replied. "Good. The Red One, in the probability, cannot swim," I said, "since there is scarce enough water in all their domains to float the tiniest craft. One of us, therefore, will have to support him through the sea to the craft we select." I had hoped that we might make the entire distance below the surface, but I fear the Red Youth could not thus perform the trip. Even the bravest of the brave among them are terrorized at the mere thought of deep water, for it has been ages since their forebears saw a lake or river or sea. "The Red One is to accompany us?" asked Zodar. "Yes." "It is well. 3 swords are better than 2, especially when the third is as mighty as this fellow's. I have seen him in battle in the arena at the rites of Isis many times, never until I saw you fight. had I seen one who seemed inconquerable, even in the face of great odds. One might think you two master and pupil, or father and son. Come to recall his face, there is some resemblance between you. It is very marked when you fight. There is the same grim smile and the same maddening contempt for your adversary apparent in every movement of your bodies and in every changing expression of your faces. Be that as it may, Zodar, he is a great fighter. I think that we will make a trio difficult to overcome. And if my friend, Tars Tarkas, Jeddak of Thark, were but one of us, he could fight our way from one end of Barsoom to the other, even though the whole world were pitted against us. It will be, said Zodar. When they find from whence you have come, that is but one of the superstitious which Isis hath foisted upon the credulous humanity. She works through the holy Therns, who are as ignorant of her real self as are the Barsoomians of the outer world. Her decrees are borne to the Therns, written in blood upon the strange parchment. The poor deluded fools think that they are receiving the revelations of the goddess through some supernatural agency, since they find these messages upon their guarded altars to which none could have access without detection. I myself have borne these messages for Isis for many years. There is a long tunnel from the temple of Isis to the principal temple of Mate Shang. It was dug years ago by the slaves of the firstborn in such utter secrecy that no Theron ever guessed its existence. The Therns, for the part, have temples dotted about the entire civilized world. Here, priests whom the people never see communicate the doctrine of the mysterious river Is, the valley door, and the lost sea of Chorus, to persuade the poor deluded creatures to take the voluntary pilgrimage that swells the wealth of the holy Therns, and adds to the number of their slaves. Thus the Therns are used as the principal means for collecting the wealth and labor that the firstborn wrest from them as they need it. Occasionally the firstborn themselves make raids upon the outer world. It is then that they capture many females of the royal houses of the Red Men and take the newest in battleships to the trained artisans to build them, that they may copy what they cannot create. We are a non-productive race, priding ourselves upon our non-productiveness. It is criminal for a firstborn to labor or invent. That is the work of the lower orders, who live merely that the firstborn may enjoy long lives of luxury and idleness. With us, fighting is all that counts. Were it not for that, there would be more of the firstborn than all other creatures on Barsoom could support. For in so far as I know, none of us ever dies a natural death. Our females would live forever, but for the fact that we tire them and remove them to make place for others. Isis alone, of all of us, is protected against death. She has lived for countless ages. Would not the other Barsoomians live forever, but for the doctrine of the voluntary pilgrimage which drags them to the bosom of Is at or before the 1000th year? I asked him. I feel now that there is no doubt but that they are precisely the same species of creature as the firstborn, and I hope that I shall live to fight for them in atonement of their sins I have committed against them through the ignorance born of generations of false teaching. As he ceased speaking, a weird call rang out across the waters of Omin. I had heard it at the same time the previous evening, and knew that it marked the ending of the day, when the men of Omin spread their silks upon the decks of battleship and cruiser and fall into a dreamless sleep of Mars. Our guard entered to inspect us for the last time before the new day broke upon the world above. His duty was soon performed, and the heavy door of our prison closed behind him. We were alone for the night. I gave him time to return to his quarters, as Zodar said he probably would do. Then I sprang to the grated window and surveyed the nearby waters. At a little distance from the island, a quarter of a mile perhaps, lay a monster battleship, while between her and the shore were a number of smaller cruisers and one-man scouts. Upon the battleship alone was there a watch. I could see him plainly in the upper works of the ship, and as I watched I saw him spread his sleeping silks upon the tiny platform in which he was stationed. Soon he threw himself at full length upon his couch. The discipline on Omin was lax indeed. But it is not to be wondered at, since no enemy guessed the existence upon Barsoom of such a fleet, or even of the firstborn, or the Sea of Omin. Why, indeed, should they maintain a watch? Presently, I dropped to the floor again and talked with Zodar, describing the various craft I had seen. "There is one there," he said. "My personal property, built to carry 5 men. That is the swiftest of the swift. If we can board her, we can at least make a memorable run for liberty." And then he went on to describe to me the equipment of the boat, her engines, and all that went to make her the flyer that she was. In his explanation, I recognized a trick of gearing that Kantos Khan had taught me that time we sailed under false names in the navy of Zodanga beneath Sabthan, the prince. And I knew then that the firstborn had stole it from the ships of Helium, for only they had thus geared. And I knew, too, that Zodar spoke the truth when he lauded the speed of his little craft, for nothing that cleaves the thin air of Mars can approximate the speed of the ships of Helium. We decided to wait for an hour at least until all the stragglers had sought their silks. In the meantime, I was to fetch the Red Youth to our cell so that we could be in readiness to make our rash break for the freedom together. I sprang to the top of our partition wall and pulled myself up onto it. There I found a flat surface about a foot in width, and along this I walked until I came to the cell in which I saw the boy sitting upon his bench. He had been leaning back against the wall, looking up at the glowing dome above Omine, and when he spied me balancing upon the partition wall above him, his eyes opened wide in astonishment. Then a wide grin of apprehensive understanding crossed his countenance. As I stooped to drop to the floor beside him, he motioned me to wait, and coming close below me, I whispered, "Catch my hand." Below me, he whispered, "Catch my hand. I can almost leap to the top of that wall myself. I have tried it many times, and each day I come a little closer. Some day I should have been able to make it." I lay upon my belly across the wall and reached my hand down far towards him. With a little run from the center of his cell, he sprang up until I grasped his outstretched hand, and thus I pulled him to the wall's top beside me. "You are the first jumper I saw among the red men of Barsoom," I said. He smiled. "It is not strange. I will tell you why when we have more time." Together we returned to the cell in which Zodar sat, descending to talk with him until the hour passed. There we made our plans for the immediate future, binding ourselves by a solemn oath to fight to the death for one another against whatever enemies would confront us. For we knew that even should we succeed in escaping the firstborn, we might still have a whole world against us. The power of religious superstition is mighty. It was agreed that I should navigate the craft after we had reached her, and that if we made the outer world in safety, we should attempt to reach Helium without a stop. "Why Helium?" asked the Red Youth. "I am a prince of Helium," I replied. He gave me a peculiar look, but said nothing further on the subject. I wondered at the time what the significance of his expression might be, but in the press of other matters it soon left my mind, nor did I have the occasion to think of it again until later. "Come," I said at length, "now is as good a time as any. Let's go." Another moment found me at the top of the partition wall again, with the boy beside me. Unbuckling my harness, I snapped together with a single long strap, which I lowered to the waiting Zodar below. He grasped the end and was soon sitting beside us. "How simple," he laughed. "The balance should have been even simpler," I replied. Then I raised myself to the top of the outer wall of the prison, just so that I could peer over and locate the passing sentry. For a matter of 5 minutes I waited, and then he came in sight, on his slow snail-like beat about the structure. I watched him until he had made the turn at the end of the building, which carried him out of sight of the side of the prison that was to witness our dash for freedom. The moment his form disappeared, I grasped Zodar and threw him to the top of the wall. Placing one end of my harness strap in his hands, I lowered him quickly to the ground below. Then the boy grasped the strap and slid down to Zodar's side. In accordance with our agreement, they did not wait for me, but walked slowly towards the water, a matter of 100 yards, directly past the guardhouse filled with sleeping soldiers. They had taken scarce a dozen steps when I too dropped to the ground and followed them leisurely toward the shore. As I passed the guardhouse, I thought of all the good blades laying there, gave me pause, for if ever men were to have need of swords, it was my companions and I, on a perilous trip upon which we were about to embark. I glanced towards Zodar and the youth and saw that they had slipped over the edge of the dock into the water. In accordance with our plan, they were to remain there, clinging to the metal rings which studded the concrete-like substance of the dock at the water's level, with only their mouths and nose above the surface of the sea until I should join them. The lure of swords within the guardhouse was strong upon me, and I hesitated a moment, half inclined to risk the attempt to take a few if needed. That he who hesitates is lost proved himself a true aphorism in this instance, for another moment saw me creeping stealthily toward the door of the guardhouse. Gently I pressed it open a crack enough to discover a dozen blacks stretched upon their silks in profound slumber. At the far side of the room, the rack that held the swords and firearms of the men. Warily I pushed the door a trifle wider to admit my body. A hinge gave out a resentful groan. One of the men stirred, and my heart stood still. I cursed myself for a fool to even thus jeopardize our chances for escape. But there was nothing for it now but to see the adventure through. With a spring as swift and as noiseless as a tiger's, I lit beside the guardsman who had moved. My hands hovered about his throat, awaiting a moment that his eyes should open. For what seemed an eternity to my overwrought nerves, I remained poised thus. Then the fellow turned again upon his side and resumed the even respiration of deep slumber. Carefully I picked my way between and over the soldiers until I gained the rack at the far side of the room. Here I turned to survey the sleeping men. All were quiet. Their regular breathing rose and fell in a soothing rhythm that seemed to me the sweetest music I had ever heard. Gingerly I drew a long sword from the rack. The scraping of the scabbard against its holder, and as I withdrew it, sounded like the filing of cast iron with a great rasp, and I looked to see the room immediately filled with alarmed and attacking guard men, but none stirred. The second sword I withdrew noiselessly, but the third clanked in its scabbard with a frightful din. I knew that it must awaken some of the men at least, and was on the point of forestalling their attack by a rapid charging for the doorway when again, to my intense surprise, not a black moved. Either they were wondrous heavy sleepers, or else the noise that I made were really much less than they seemed to me. I was about to leave the rack when my attention was attracted by the revolvers. I knew that I could not carry more than one away with me, for I was already too heavily laden to move quietly with any degree of safety or speed. As I took one of them from its pin, my eye fell for the first time on an open window beside the rack. Here was a splendid means of escape, for it led directly upon the dock, not 20 feet from the water's edge. As I congratulated myself, I heard the door opposite me, and there, looking me full in the face, stood the officer of the guard. He evidently took it in the situation at a glance and appreciated the gravity of it as quickly as I, for our revolvers came up simultaneously, and the sounds of two reports were as one as we touched the buttons on the grips and exploded the cartridges. I felt the wind of his bullet as it whizzed past my ear, and at the same instant I saw him crumple to the ground. Where I hit him I do not know, nor if I killed him, for scarce he had started to collapse when I was through the window at my rear. In another second, the waters of Omin closed above my head, and the three of us thus were making for the little flyer 100 yards away. Zodar was burdened with the boy, and I with the three long swords, the revolver I had dropped, so that while we were both strong swimmers, it seemed to me that we moved at a snail's pace through the water. I was swimming entirely beneath the surface, but Zodar was compelled to rise often to let the youth breathe, so it was a wonder that we were not discovered long before we were. In fact, we reached the boat's side and were all on board before the watch upon the battleship, aroused by the shots, detected us. Then an alarm gun bellowed from the ship's bow, and its deep boom reverberating in deafening tones beneath the rocky dome of Omin. Instantly the sleeping thousand were awake. The decks of 1,000 monster craft teemed with fighting men, for an alarm on Omin was a thing of rare occurrence. We cast away before the sound of the first gun had died, and another second saw us rising swiftly from the surface of the sea. I lay at full length along the deck with levers and buttons of controlling before me. Zodar and the boy were stretched directly behind me, prone also that we might offer a little resistance to the air as possible. "Rise high," whispered Zodar. "They dare not fire their heavy guns towards the dome. The fragments of the shells would drop back among their own craft." If we are high enough, our keel plates will protect us from rifle fire. I did as he bade. Below us, we could see the men leaping into the water by hundreds and striking out for the small cruisers and one-man flyers that lay moored about the big ships. The larger craft were getting under way, following us rapidly, but not rising from the water. "A little to your right," cried Zodar, for there were no points of compass upon Omin, where every direction is due north. The pandemonium that had broken out below us was deafening. Rifles cracked, officers shouted orders, men yelling directions to one another from the waters and from the decks of the myriad boats, while through all ran the purr of countless propellers cutting water and air. I had not dared pull my speed lever to the highest for fear of overturning the mouth of the shaft that passed from Omin's dome to the world above. But even so, we were hitting a clip that I doubt has ever been equaled to the windless sea. Hitting a clip that I doubt has ever been equaled on the windless sea. The smaller flyers were commencing to rise towards us when Zodar shouted, "The shaft! The shaft! Dead ahead!" And I saw the opening, black and yawning in the glowing dome of this underworld. A 10-man cruiser was rising directly in front to cut off our escape. It was the only vessel that stood in our way, but at that rate that it was traveling, it would come between us and the shaft in plenty of time to thwart our plans. It was rising at an angle of about 45 degrees dead ahead of us, with the evident intention of combing us with grappling hooks from above as it skimmed low over our decks. There was but one forlorn hope for us, and I took it. It was useless to try to pass over her, for that would have allowed her to force us against the rock dome above, and we were already too near that as it was. To have attempted to dive below her would have put us entirely at her mercy, and precisely where she wanted us. Sorry. Oh, first time in a long time I lost my spot. Precisely where she wanted us, on either side of 100 of menacing craft were hastening towards us. The alternative was filled with risk. In fact, it was all risk, with but a slender chance of success. As we neared the cruiser, I rose as though to pass above her, so that she would do just what she did do, rise at a steeper angle to force me still higher. Then, as we were almost upon her, I yelled to my companions to hold tight, and throwing little vessel into her highest speed, I deflected her bows at the same instant until we were running horizontally and at terrific velocity straight for the cruiser's keel. Her commander may have seen my intentions then, but it was too late. Almost at an instant of impact, I turned my bows upward, and then, with a shattering jolt, we were in collision. What I had hoped for happened. The cruiser, already tilted at a perilous angle, was carried completely over backward by the impact of my smaller vessel. Her crew fell, twisting and screaming through the air to the water far below, while the cruiser, her propellers still madly churning, dived swiftly head foremost after them to the bottom of the Sea of Omin. The collision crushed our steel bows, and notwithstanding every effort on our part came near to hurtling us from the deck. As it was, we landed in a wildly clutching heap at the very extremity of the flyer, where Zodar and I succeeded in grasping the handrail, but the boy would have plunged overboard had I not fortunately grasped his ankle, as he was already partially over. Unguided, our vessel careened wildly in its mad flight, rising ever nearer the rocks above. It took but an instant, however, for me to regain the levers, and with the roof barely 50 feet above, I turned her nose once more to the horizontal plane and headed her again for the black mouth of the shaft. The collision had retarded our progress, and now 100 swift scouts were close upon us. Zodar had told me that ascending the shaft by virtue of our repulsive ray alone would give our enemies the best chance to overtake us, since our propellers would be idle, and in rising we would be outclassed by many of our pursuers. The swifter craft are seldom equipped with large buoyancy tanks, since their added bulk of them tends to reduce the vessel's speed. As many boats were now quite close to us, it was inevitable that we would be quickly overhauled in the shaft and captured or killed in short order. To me, there was always seemed a way to gain the opposite side of an obstacle. If one cannot pass over it or below it or around it, then why? Why then there is but a single alternative left, and that is just to pass through it. I cannot get around the fact that many of these other boats could rise faster than ours by the fact of our greater buoyancy, but I was none the less determined to reach the outer world far in advance of them or die a death of my own choosing in the event of failure. Reverse! Screamed Zodar behind me. For the love of our first ancestor, reverse! We are at the shaft. Hold tight, I screamed in reply. Grasp the boy and hold tight. We are going straight up the shaft. The words were scarce out of my mouth as we swept beneath the pitch-black opening. I threw the boy hard up, dragged the speed lever to its last notch, and clutching the stanchion with one hand and the steering wheel with the other, hung on like grim death and consigned my soul to its author. I heard a little explanation of surprise from Zodar, followed by a grim laugh. The boy laughed too and said something which I could not catch for the whistling of the wind at our awful speed. I looked above my head, hoping to catch a gleam of stars with which I could direct our course and hold the hurtling thing that bore us true to the center of the shaft. To have touched the side at the speed that we were making would doubtless have resulted in instant death for us all. But not a star showed above us, only utter and impenetrable darkness. Then I glanced below me, and there I saw a rapidly diminishing circle of light, the mouth of the opening above the phosphorescent radiance of Omine. By this I steered, endeavoring to keep the circle of light below me ever perfect. At best, it was but a slender cord that held us from destruction, and I think I steered that night more by intuition than blind faith, than by skill or reason. We were not long in the shaft, and possibly the very fact of our enormous speed saved us, for evidently we started in the right direction, and so quickly we were out again that we had no time to alter our course. Omine lies perhaps 2 miles below the surface crust of Mars. Our speed must have approximated 200 miles an hour, for Martian flyers are swift, so that at most we were in the shaft not over 40 seconds. We must have been out for it sometime second. We must have been out of it for some seconds before I realized that we had accomplished the impossible. Black darkness enshrouded all of us. There were neither moons nor stars. Never before had I seen such a thing upon Mars, and for the moment I was nonplussed. Then the explanation came to me. It was the summer at the South Pole. The ice cap was melting, and those meteoritic phenomena, clouds unknown upon the greater part of Barsoom, were shutting out all the light from the heaven in this portion of the planet. Fortunate indeed it was for us, nor did it take me long to grasp the opportunity to escape with this happy condition offered us. Which this happy condition offered us. Keeping the boat's nose at a stiff angle, I raced her for the impenetrable curtain which nature had hung above this dying world to shut us out from the sight of the pursuing enemies. We plunged through the cold, damp fog without diminishing our speed, and in a moment emerged into the glorious light of the 2 moons and 1,000,000 stars. I dropped into a horizontal course and headed due north. Our enemies were a good half-hour behind us with no conception of direction. We had performed the miraculous and come through 1,000 dangers unscathed. We had escaped from the land of the firstborn. No other prisoner in all the ages of Barsoom had done this thing. And now as I look back upon it, it did not seem to have been so difficult after all. I said as much to Zodar over my shoulder. It is very wonderful nevertheless, he replied. No one else could just accomplished it but John Carter. At the sound of that name, that boy jumped to his feet. John Carter! He cried. John Carter? Why, man, John Carter, Prince of Helium, has been dead for years. I'm his son. Ooh. Well, that was my suspicion, was that the boy was John Carter's son. 20 graduating class was 4. I don't remember how big my graduating class was. Something like 900 people. I had a big class. Maybe it was lower than that, 250. Well, that took a mighty turn, didn't it? Got 8 ghosty readers in here enjoying. Really appreciate y'all. Oh man, what's he gonna do now? Do you think he's going to regret putting him in so much danger just now? Or do you think he's gonna be proud daddy? What do we think is going to happen? Proud is my guess, says Heavy D. That's what I would say so too. I have a feeling he's gonna be asking about his mom. Dad. That's funny. Guess we'll have to see. Guess so. We do have 2 more chapters left. I think we're right on track. And now we get a nice little family reunion. I wonder if Jada Thoris is okay. All right. That was an intense chapter as well. They escaped the lands of death. Chapter 14. The Eyes in the Dark. My son! I could not believe my ears. Slowly I rose and faced the handsome youth. Now that I looked at him closely, I commenced to see why his face and personality had attracted me so strongly. There was much of his mother's incomparable beauty in his clear-cut features, but it was strong, masculine beauty, and his gray eyes and the expression of them were mine. The boy stood facing me, half hope and half uncertainty in his look. "Tell me of your mother," I said. "Tell me all you can of the years that I have been robbed by a relentless fate of her dear companionship." With a cry of pleasure he sprang towards me and threw his arms around my neck, and for a brief moment as I held my boy close to me, the tears welled to my eyes, and I was like to have choked after the manner of some maudlin fool. But I do not regret it, nor am I ashamed. A long life has taught me that a man may seem weak where women and children are concerned, and yet be anything but a weakling in the sterner avenues of life. "Your stature, your manner, the terrible ferocity of your swordsmanship," said the boy, "are as my mother has described them to me 1,000 times, but even with such evidence I could not scarce credit the truth from what seemed so improbable to me, however much I desired it to be true. Do you know what thing it was that convinced me more than all the others?" "What, my boy?" I asked. "Your first words to me. They were of my mother. None else but the man who loved her as she told me my father did would have thought of her first. For long years, my son, I can scarce recall a moment that the radiant vision of your mother's face had not been ever before me. Tell me of her." "Those who have known her longest say that she has not changed, unless it to be more beautiful, were that possible. Only when she thinks I am not about to see her, her face grows very sad and, oh, so wistful. She thinks ever of you, my father, and all Helium mourns with her and for her. Her grandfather's people love her. They love you also, and fairly worship your memory as the savior of Barsoom. Each year that brings its anniversary of the day that saw you racing across the near-dead world to unlock the secret of the awful portal behind which lay the mighty power of life for countless millions. A great festival is held in your honor. But there are tears mingled with that thanksgiving. Tears of real regret that the author of the happiness is not with them to share the joy of living he died to give them. Upon all Barsoom there is no greater name than John Carter." "And by what name has your mother called you, my boy?" I asked. "The people of Helium asked that I be named with my father's name, but my mother said no, that you and she had chosen a name for me together, and that your wish must be honored before all others. So the name that she called me is the one that you desired, a combination of hers and yours. Cathoris. Cathoris. Carthoris." Zodar had been at the wheel as I talked with my son, and now he called me. "She is dropping badly by the head, John Carter," he said. So long as we are rising at the stiff angle, I was not it was not noticeable. But now that I'm trying to keep a horizontal course, it is different. The wound in her bow has opened one of her forward ray tanks. It was true, and after I had examined the damage, I found that much graver matter than I had anticipated. Not only was the forced angle at which we were compelled to maintain the bow in order to keep a horizontal course greatly impeding our speed, but at that rate we were losing our repulsive rays from the forward tank. It was about a question of an hour or more when we would be floating stern up and helpless. We had slightly reduced our speed with the dawning of our sense of security, but now I took the helm once more and pulled the noble little engine wide open, so that again we raced north at terrific velocity. In the meantime, Carthoris and Zodar, with tools in hand, were putting with the new great rent on the bow in hopeless endeavor to stem the tide of our escaping race. It was still dark when we passed the northern boundary of the ice cap at the area of clouds. Below us lay a typical Martian landscape, rolling ochre sea bottom of long dead seas. Low surrounding hills, with here and there grim and silent cities of the dead past. Great piles of mighty architecture, tenanted only by age-old memories of once powerful race and by the great white apes of Barsoom. It was becoming more and more difficult to maintain our little vessel at the horizontal position. Lower and lower sagged the bow until it became necessary to stop the engine to prevent our flight terminating in the swift dive to the ground. As the sun rose and the light of the new day swept over the darkness of night, our craft gave a final spasmodic plunge, turned half upon her side, and then, with the deck tilting at a sickening angle, swung in a low circle. Her bow, dropping farther below her stern each moment. To handrail and stanchion we clung, and finally, as we saw the end approaching, snapped the buckles of our harness to the rings at her side. In another moment the deck reared at an angle of 90 degrees, and we hung in our leather, with our feet dangling 1,000 yards above the ground. I was swinging quite close to the controlling devices, so I reached out to the lever that directed the rays of repulsion. The boat responded to the touch, and very gently we began to sink toward the ground. It was a full half an hour before we touched. Directly north of us rose a rather lofty range of hills, towards which we decided to make our way, since they afforded greater opportunity for concealment from the pursuers we were confident might stumble in this direction. An hour later found us in the time-rounded gullies of the hills, amid the beautiful flowering plants that abound in the arid waste places of Barsoom. There we found numbers of huge milk-giving shrubs, that strange plant which serves in great part as food and drink for wild hordes of green men. It was indeed a boon to us, for we were all but nearly famished. Beneath a cluster of these, which afforded perfect concealment from the wandering air scouts, we lied down to sleep. For me, the first time in many hours. This was the beginning of my 5th day upon Barsoom, since I had found myself suddenly translated from my cottage on the Hudson to Dore, the Valley Beautiful, the Valley Hideous. In all the time that I slept but twice, though once the clock round within the storehouse of the Therns, It was mid-afternoon when I had awakened by someone seizing my hand and covering it with kisses. With a start, I opened my eyes to look at the beautiful face of Thuvia. "Prince, my prince!" she cried, in an ecstasy of happiness. "'Tis you whom I mourned is dead. My ancestors have been good to me. I have not lived in vain." The girl's voice awoke Zodar and Carthoris. The boy gazed upon the woman in surprise, but she did not seem to realize the presence of another than I. She would have thrown her arms about my neck and smothered me with caresses had I not gently but firmly disengaged myself. "Come, come, Thuvia," I said soothingly. "You are overwrought by the danger and hardships that have passed through. You fought yourself, as you forget. You forget yourself, as you forget that I am husband of the Princess of Helium." "I forget nothing, my prince," she replied. "You have spoken no word of love to me, nor do I expect that ever you shall. But nothing can prevent me from loving you. I would not take the place of Dejah Thoris. My great ambition is to serve you, my prince, forever as your slave. No greater boon could I ask, no greater honor could I crave, no greater happiness could I hope." As I have before said, I am no ladies' man, and I must admit that I seldom have felt so uncomfortable and embarrassed as I did in that moment. While I was quite familiar with the Martian custom, which allows female slaves to Martian men, whose high and chivalrous honor is always ample protection for every woman in his household, yet I had never myself chosen other than men as my body servants. And I ever return to Helium, Thuvia? I said. You shall go with me, but as an honored equal, not as a slave. There you shall find plenty of handsome young nobles who would face Isis herself to win a smile from you, and we shall have you married in short order to one of the best of them. Forget your foolish gratitude begotten infatuation, which your innocence has mistaken for love. I like your friendship better, Thuvia. You are my master. It shall be as you say, she replied simply, but there was a note of sadness in her voice. How came you here, Thuvia? I asked. And where is Tarstarchus? The great Thark, I fear, is dead, she replied sadly. He was a mighty fighter, but a multitude of green warriors from another horde than his overwhelmed him. The last I saw of him, they were bearing him, wounding and bleeding, to the deserted city from which they had sailed to attack us. You are not sure that he is dead, then? I asked. And where is the city of which you speak? It is just beyond this range of hills. The vessel in which you so nobly resigned a place that we might find escape defied our small skill in navigation, with the result that we drifted aimlessly for about 2 days. Then we decided to abandon the craft and attempt to make our way on foot to the nearest waterway. Yesterday we crossed these hills and came upon the dead city beyond. We had passed within its streets and were walking toward the central position when, an interesting avenue, we saw a body of green warriors approaching. Tarstarchus was in advance, and they saw him, but me they did not see. The Thark sprang back to my side and forced me to an adjacent doorway where he told me to remain in hiding until I could escape, making my way to Helium if possible. There will be no escape for me now, he said, for these be the Warhoon of the South. When they see my mettle, it will be to the death. Then he stepped out to meet them. My prince, such fighting! For an hour they swarmed about him until the Warhoon, dead, formed a hill where he had stood. But at last they overwhelmed him, those behind pushing the foremost upon him until there remained no space to swing his great sword. Then he stumbled and went down, and they rolled over him like a huge wave. Then they carried him away toward the heart of the city. He was dead, I think, for I did not see him move. Before we go further, we must be sure, I said. I cannot leave Tarstarchus alive among the Warhoons. Tonight I shall enter the city and make sure. And I shall go with you, spoke Carthoris. And I, said Zodar. Neither one of you shall go, I replied. It is work that requires stealth and strategy, not force. One man alone may succeed where more would invite disaster. I shall go alone, and if I need your help, I will return for you. They did not like it, but both were good soldiers, and it was agreed that I should command. The sun already was low, so that I did not have long to wait before the sudden darkness of Barsoom engulfed us. With a parting word of instruction to Cathoris and Zodar, in case I should not return, I bade them all farewell and set forth to the rapid dog trot toward the city. As I emerged from the hills, the nearer moon was winging its wild flight through the heavens, its bright beams turning to burnishing silver and barbaric splendor of the ancient metropolis. The city had been built upon the gently rolling foothills that in the dim and distant past had sloped down to meet the sea. It was due to this fact that I had no difficulty in entering the streets unobserved. The green hordes that use these deserted cities seldom occupy more than a few squares about the central plaza, and as they come and go always across the Dead Sea bottoms that the cities face, it is usually a matter of comparative ease to enter from the hillside. Once within the streets, I kept close to the dense shadows of the walls. At intersections, I halted a moment to make sure that none was in sight before I sprang quickly to the shadows of the opposite side. Thus I made the journey to the vicinity of the plaza without detection. As I approached the purlieus of the inhabited portion of the city, I was made aware of the proximity of the warriors' quarters by squealing and grunting of the thoats and the zetidars corralled within the hollow courtyards formed by the buildings surrounding each square. These old familiar sounds that are so distinctive of green Martian life sent a thrill of pleasure surging through me. It was as one might feel on coming home after a long absence. It was amid such sounds that I had first counted the incomparable Deja Thoris and the age-old marble hills of the dead city of Corinne. As I stood in the shadows at the far corner of the first square, which housed the member of the horde, I saw the warriors emerging from several of the buildings. They all went in the same direction, toward a great building which stood in the center of the plaza. My knowledge of green Martian customs convinced me that this was either the quarters of the principal chieftain or contained the audience chamber wherein the Jeddak met his Jeds and lesser chieftains. In either event, it was evident that something was afoot, which might have bearing on the recent capture of Tars Tarkas. To reach this building, which I now felt it imperative to do so, I must need traverse the entire length of one square and cross a broad avenue in the portion of the plaza. From the noises of the animals which came from every courtyard about me, I knew that there were many people in the surrounding buildings, probably several communities of the great hordes of the Warhoons of the South. To pass undetected among all these people was in itself a difficult task, but if I was to find and rescue the great Thark, I must expect even more formidable obstacles before success could be mine. I had entered the city from the south and now stood on the corner of the avenue through which I had passed in the first intersecting avenue south of the plaza. The buildings upon the south side of this square did not appear to be inhabited, as I could see no lights, and so I decided to gain the inner courtyard through one of them. Nothing occurred to interrupt my progress, though the deserted pile I choose. Through the deserted pile I choose, and I came to the inner court close to the rear walls of the east buildings without detection. Within the court, a great herd of thoats and zititters moved restlessly about, chopping the moss-like ochre vegetation that grows practically the entire uncultivated area of Mars. What breeze there was, came from the northwest, so there was little danger that the beasts could scent me. Had they, their squealing and grunting would have grown into such volume as to attract the attention of the warriors within the building. Close to the east wall, beneath the overhanging balconies of the second floors, I crept in dense shadows the full length of the courtyard until I came to the buildings at the north end. These were lighted for about 3 floors up, but above the third floor was all dark. To pass through the lighted rooms was, of course, out of the question, since they are swarmed with green Martian men and women. My only path lay through the upper floors, and to gain these it would be necessary to scale the face of the wall. The reaching of the balcony of the second floor was a matter of easy accomplishment. An agile leap gave my hands grasp until the stone handrail above. In another instance, I had drawn myself upon the balcony. Here, through the open windows, I saw the green folks squatting upon their sleeping silks and furs, grunting an occasional monosyllable, which, in connection with their wondrous telepathic powers, is ample for their conversational requirements. As I drew closer to listen to their words, a warrior entered the room from the hall beyond. "Come, Tangama," he cried. "We are to take the Thark before Kaja. Bring another with you." The warrior addressed rose, and beckoning to a fellow squatting near, the three turned and left the apartment. If I could but follow them, the chance might come to freeze Tartarchus at once. At least I would learn the location of his prison. At my right was a door leading from the balcony into the building. It was at the end of the unlighted hall, and on the impulse of the moment I stepped within. The hall was broad and led straight through to the front of the building. On either side were the doorways of the various apartments which lined it. I had no more than entered the corridor when I saw 3 warriors at the other end, those whom I had just seen leaving the apartment. Then a turn to the right took them from my sight again. Quickly I hastened along the hallway in my pursuit. My gait was reckless, but I felt the fate had been kind indeed to throw such an opportunity within my grasp, and I could not afford to allow it to elude me now. At the far end of the corridor, I found a spiral stairway leading to the floors above and below. The 3 had evidently left the floor by this avenue. That they had gone down and not up, I was sure from my knowledge of these ancient buildings and the methods of the Warhoons. I myself had once been a prisoner of the cruel hordes of the northern Warhoon, and the memory of the underground dungeon in which I lay still is vivid in my memory. And so I felt certain that Tars Tarkas lay in the dark pits beneath some nearby building, and that in that direction I should find the trail of 3 warriors leading to his cell. Nor was I wrong. At the bottom of the runway, or rather at the landing on the floor below, I saw that the shaft descended into the pits beneath. And as I glanced down, the flickering light of a torch revealed the presence of the 3 I was trailing. Down they went towards the pits beneath the structure, and at a safe distance behind I followed the flicker of their torch. This way, the way led through a maze of tortuous corridors, unlighted save for the wavering light they carried. We have gone perhaps 100 yards when the party turned abruptly through a doorway at their right. I hastened on, and rapidly as I dared through the darkness until I reached the point at which they had left the corridor. There, through an open door, I saw them removing the chains that secured the great Thark, Tars Tarkas, to the wall. Hustling him roughly between them, they came immediately from the chamber, so quickly, in fact, that I was near to being apprehended. But I managed to run along the corridor in the direction I had been going in my pursuit of them far enough to be without the radius of their meager light as they emerged from the cell. I had naturally assumed that they would return with Tars Tarkas the same way they had come, which would have carried them away from me, but to my chagrin they wheeled directly in my direction as they left the room. There was nothing for me but to hasten on in advance and keep out of the light of their torch. I dared not attempt to halt in the darkness of any of the many intersecting corridors, for I knew nothing of the direction they might take. Chance was as likely that they not to carry me into the very corridor they might choose to enter. The sensation of moving rapidly through these dark passages was far from reassuring. I knew not at what moment I might plunge headlong into some terrible pit, or meet with some ghoulish creatures that inhabit these lower worlds beneath the dead cities of dying Mars. There filtered to me a faint radiance from the torch of the men behind, just enough to permit me to trace the direction from the winding passages directly before me, and so keep me from dashing myself against the walls at the turns. Presently I came to a place where 5 corridors diverged from a common point, and I hastened along one of them for some little distance when suddenly the faint light of the torch disappeared from behind me. I paused to listen for sounds of the party behind me, but the silence was as utter as the silence of the tomb. Quickly I realized that the warriors had taken one of the other corridors with their prisoner, and so I hastened back with the feeling of unconsiderable relief to take up a much safer and more desirable position behind them. It was much slower work returning, however, than it had been coming, for now the darkness was as utter as the silence. It was necessary to feel every foot of the way back with my hand against the side of the wall, that I might not pass the spot where the 5 roads radiated. After what seemed an eternity to me, I reached the place and recognized it by groping across the entrances to the several corridors until I counted 5 of them. In not one, however, showed the faintest sign of light. I listened intently, but the naked feet of the green men sent back no guiding echoes, though presently I thought I detected the clank of sidearms in a far distance of the middle corridor. Up this, then, I hastened, searching for the light, and stopping to listen occasionally for the repetition of the sound. But soon I was forced to admit that I must have following a blind lead, as only darkness and silence rewarded my efforts. Again I retraced my steps toward the parting of the ways when to my surprise I came upon the entrance to 3 diverging corridors, any one of which I might have traversed in my hasty dash after the false clue I had been following. Here was a pretty fix indeed. Once back to the point where the 5 passages met, I might wait with some assurance for the return of the warriors with Tars Tarkas. My knowledge of their customs lent color to the belief that he was but being escorted to the audience chamber to have sentence passed upon him. I had not the slightest doubt that they would preserve so doughty a warrior as the great Thark for the rare sport he would furnish in the great games. But unless I could find my way back to the point, the chances were most excellent that I would wander for days through the awful blackness until, overcome by thirst or hunger, I lay down to die. Or, what was that? A faint scuffling sound behind me. And as I cast a hasty glance over my shoulder, my blood froze in my veins, for the thing I saw there, It was not so much fear of the present danger as it was the horrifying memories that recalled of that time I near went mad over the corpse of a man I had killed in the dungeons of the Warhoons, when blazing eyes came out of the dark recesses and dragged the thing that had been a man from my clutches, and I heard it scraping over the stone of my prison as they bore it away to their terrible feast. And now, in these black pits of the other Warhoons, I looked into those same fiery eyes blazing at me through the terrible darkness, revealing no sign of the beast behind them. I think that the most fearsome attribute of these awesome creatures is their silence and the fact that one never sees them. Nothing but those baleful eyes glaring unblinkingly out of the dark void behind. Grasping my longsword tightly in my hand, I backed slowly along the corridor, away from the thing that watched me. But ever as I retreated, the eyes advanced, nor was there any sound, not even the sound of breathing, except an occasional shuffling sound, as of the dragging of a dead limb, that had first attracted my attention. On and on I went, but I could not escape my sinister pursuer. Suddenly, I heard the shuffling noise at my right, and then, looking, saw another pair of eyes, evidently approaching from an intersecting corridor. As I started to renew my slow retreat, I heard the noise repeated behind me, and then before I could turn, I heard it again at my left. The things were all about me. They had me surrounded at the intersection of two corridors. Retreat was cut off in all directions unless I chose to charge one of the beasts. Even then I had no doubt, but the others would hurl themselves upon my back. I could not even guess their size or nature of these weird creatures. That they were of godly proportions, I guessed from the fact that their eyes were level with my own. Why is it that darkness so magnifies our dangers? By day I would have charged the great Banth itself and thought it necessary, but hemmed in by the darkness of these silent pits, I hesitated before a pair of eyes. Soon I saw the matter shortly being taken entirely from my hands, for the eyes at my right were moving slower nearer me, as were those at my left, and those behind and before me. Gradually they were closing in upon me, but still that awful stealthy silence. For what seemed hours, the eyes approached gradually closer and closer until I felt I should go mad for the horror of it. I had been constantly turning this way and that to prevent any sudden rush from behind, until I was fairly worn out. At length I could endure it no longer, and taking a fresh grasp on my longsword, I turned suddenly and charged down upon one of my tormentors. As I was almost upon it, the thing retreated before me, but a sound from behind caused me to wheel in time to see three pairs of eyes rushing at me from the rear. With a cry of rage, I turned to meet the cowardly beasts, but as I advanced, they retreated as had their fellow. Another glance over my shoulder discovered the first eye sneaking on me again. And again I charged, only to see the eyes retreat before me, and heard the muffled rush of the three at my back. Thus we continued, and the eyes always being a little bit closer in the end than they had been before, until I thought that I should go mad with terrible strain of the ordeal. Then they were waiting to spring upon my back seemed evident, and that it would not be long before they succeeded was equally apparent. For I could not endure the wear of these repeated charges and countercharges indefinitely, in fact. I could feel myself weakening from the mental and physical strain I had been undergoing. At that moment I caught another glimpse from the corner of my eye, and a single pair of eyes at my back making a sudden rush upon me. I turned to meet the charge. There was a quick rush of the three from the other direction, but I determined to pursue the single pair until I should have at least settled my account with one of these beasts, and thus be relieved of the strain of meeting attacks from both directions. There was no sound in the corridor, only that of my own breathing. Yet I knew those three uncanny creatures were almost upon me. My eyes in front were not retreating. The eyes in front were not retreating so rapidly now. I was almost within sword's reach of them. I raised my sword arm to deal the blow that should free me, and then I felt a heavy body upon my back, a cold, moist, slimy something fastening itself upon my throat. I stumbled and went down. Whew. Well then, seems like he's fighting some more hoon. I did have that thought, like maybe the light came back and it was three ferocious little bunnies or something. But yeah, that would probably freak me out. That would probably freak me out something good. All right. Let's go ahead and start our fifth and final chapter of the night. Chapter 15, which is Flight and Pursuit. And I appreciate you all being here. 11 of you in here. All right. Let's go. Chapter 15, Flight and Pursuit. I could not have been unconscious more than a few seconds, and yet I know that I was unconscious. For the next thing I realized was that a growing radiance was illuminating the corridor about me, and the eyes were gone. I was unharmed, except for a slight bruise upon my forehead where it had struck the stone, flagging as I fell. I sprang to my feet to ascertain the cause of the light. It came from a torch in the hand of one of the party of the four green warriors who were coming rapidly down the corridor towards me. They had not yet seen me, and so I lost no time in slipping into the first intersecting corridor that I could find. This time, however, I did not advance so far away from the main corridor as on the other occasion that had resulted in my losing Tarstarchus and his guards. The party came rapidly towards the opening of the passageway in which I was crouched against the wall, and as they passed by, I breathed a sigh of relief. I had not been discovered, and best of all, the party was the same that I had followed into the pits. It consisted of Tarstarchus and his three guards. I fell in behind them, and soon we were at the cell in which the great Thark had been chained. Two of the warriors remained without, while the man with the keys entered with the Thark to fasten his irons upon him once more. The two outside started to stroll slowly in the direction of the spiral runway which had led to the floors above, and in a moment were lost to view beyond the turn of the corridor. The torch had been stuck in a socket beside the door, so that its rays illuminated both the corridor and the cell in the same time. As I saw the two warriors disappear, I approached the entrance of the cell with a well-defined plan already formulated. While I disliked the thought of carrying out the thing that I had decided upon, there seemed no alternative if Tarstarchus and I were to go back together to my little camp in the hills. Keeping near the wall, I came quite close to the door to Tarstarchus' cell, and there I stood with my longsword above my head, grasped with both hands that I might bring it down in one quick cut upon the skull of the jailer as he emerged. I disliked to dwell upon what followed after I heard the footsteps of the man as he approached the doorway. It is enough that within another minute or two, Tarstarchus, wearing the medal of a Warhoon chief, was hurrying down the corridor toward the spiral runway, bearing a Warhoon's torch to light the way. A dozen paces behind him followed John Carter, Prince of Helium. The two companions of the men now lay beside the door of the cell that had been Tarstarchus, and just started to ascend the runway as the Thark came into view. "Why so long, Tangama?" cried one of the men. "I had trouble with the lock," replied Tarstarchus, "and now I find that I have left my short sword in the Thark's cell. Go on now, I'll return and fetch it." "As you will, Tangama," replied he who had spoken before. "We'll see you directly above." "Yes," replied Tarstarchus, and turned as though to retrace his steps to the cell. But he only waited until the two disappeared at the floor above. Then I joined him. We extinguished the torch, and together we crept toward the spiral incline that led to the upper floors of the building. At the first floor, we found that the hallway run had been halfway through, hesitating. Wow. At the first floor, we found that the runway hall had but halfway through, necessitating the crossing of the rear room full of green folk ere we could reach the inner courtyard. So there was but one thing left for us to do, and that was to gain the second floor and the hallway through which I had traversed the length of the building. Cautiously we ascended. We could hear the sounds of the conversation coming from the room above, but the hall still was unlighted, nor was anyone in sight as we gained the top of the runway. Together we threaded along the hall and reached the balcony overlooking the courtyard without being detected. At our right was a window letting into the room which I'd seen Tangama and the other warriors as they started to Tark's cell earlier in the evening. His companions had returned here, and we now overheard a portion of their conversation. "What can be detaining Tangama?" asked one. "He certainly could not be all this time fetching his short sword from the Thark cell," spoke another. "His short sword?" asked a woman. "What mean you?" "Tangama left his short sword in the Thark cell," explained the first speaker, "and left us at the runway to return to get it." "Tangama wore no short sword this night," said the woman. "It was broken in today's battle with the Thark, and Tangama gave it to me to repair. See, I have it right here." As she spoke, she drew Tangama's short sword from beneath her sleeping silks and furs. The warriors sprang to their feet. "There's something amiss here," cried one. "'Tis even what I myself thought when Tangama left us at the runway," said another. "Methought then that his voice sounded strangely. Come, let us hasten to the pits." We waited to hear no more. Slinging my harness into a long single strap, I lowered Tarkus to the courtyard beneath, and an instant later dropped to his side. We had spoken scarcely a dozen words since I had felled Tangama in the cell door, at the cell door, and seen the torch's light and the expression of utter bewilderment upon the great Thark's face. "By this time," he said, "I should have learned to wonder at nothing which John Carter accomplishes." That was all. He did not need to tell me that he appreciated my friendship, which had prompted me to risk my life to rescue him, nor did he need to say that he was glad to see me. This fierce green warrior had been the first to greet me that day, now 20 years gone, which had witnessed my first advent upon Mars. He had met me with a leveled spear and cruel hatred in his heart as he charged down upon me, bending low at the sides of his mighty thoat as I stood beside the incubator of his horde upon the Dead Sea bottom beyond Kurad. And now, among the inhabitants of two worlds, I counted none a better friend than Tarkus, Jeddak of the Tharks. As we reached the courtyard, we stood in the shadows beneath the balcony for a moment to discuss our plans. "There will be 5 now in the party, Tarkus," I said. "Thuvia, Zodar, Cathordus, and ourself. We shall need 5 thoats to bear us." "Cathorus?" he cried. "Your son?" "Yes, I found him in the prison on Shador, on the Sea of Omin, in the land of the firstborn." "I know not any of these places, John Carter." "Be they upon Barsoom?" "Upon and below, my friend. We wait until we shall have made our good escape, and you shall hear the strangest narrative that ever a Barsoomian of the outer world gave ear to. Now we must steal our thoats and be well away to the north before these fellows discover that we have tricked them." In safety, we reached the great gates at the far end of the courtyard, through which it was necessary to take our thoats to the avenue beyond. It is no easy matter to handle 5 of these great fierce beasts, which by nature are as wild and ferocious as their masters and held in subjection by cruelty and brute force alone. As we approached them, they sniffed our unfamiliar scent and with squeals of rage circled about us. Their long, massive necks, upreared, raised their great gaping mouths high above our heads. They are fearsome appearing brutes at best, but when they are aroused, they look fully as dangerous as they look. The thoat stands a good 10 feet at the shoulder. His hide is sleek and hairless, and of dark slate color on back and sides, shading down his 8 legs to a vivid yellow and a huge padded nailless feet. The belly is pure white, a broad flat tail, larger at the tip than at the root, completes the picture of this ferocious green Martian mount, a fit war steed for these warlike people. As the thoats are guided by telepathic means alone, there is no need for rein or bridle, and so our object was now to find 2 that would obey our unspoken commands. As they charged about us, we succeeded in mastering them sufficiently to prevent any concerted attack upon us, but the din of their squealing was certain to bring investigating warriors into the courtyard, where it was to continue much longer. At length I was successful in reaching the side of one great brute, and ere he knew what I was about, I was firmly seated astride his glossy back. A moment later, Tarkus had caught and mounted another, and then between us we herded 3 or 4 more toward the great gates. Tarkus rode ahead of me, and, leaning down to the latch, threw the barriers open while I held those loose thoats from breaking back into the herd. Then together we rode through the avenue on our stolen mounts, and without waiting to close the gates, hurried off toward the southern boundary of the city. Thus far, our escape had been little short of marvelous, nor did our good fortune desert us, for we passed the outer pyramids of the dead city and came to our camp without hearing even the faintest sound of pursuit. Here, a low whistle, a prearranged signal, apprised the balance of our party that I was returning, and we were met by the three with every manifestation of enthusiastic rejoicing. But little time was wasted in narration of our adventure. Tarstarchus and Carthoris exchanged a dignified and formal greeting upon Barsoom. But I could tell intuitively that the Thark loved my boy and that Carthoris reciprocated his affection. Zodar and the Green Jeddak were formally presented to each other, then Thuvia was lifted to the least factitious thoat. Zodar and Carthoris mounted two others, and we set out rapid pace toward the east. At the far extremity of the city, we encircled toward the north, and under the glorious rays of the two moons, we sped noiselessly across the Dead Sea bottom, away from the war hoons and the firstborn. But to what new dangers and adventures we knew not. Toward noon of the following day, we halted to rest our mounts and ourselves. The beast we hobbled, that they might move slowly about, cropping in the ochre-like moss vegetation which constitutes both food and drink for them on the marsh. Thuvia volunteered to remain on watch while the balance of the party slept for the hour. It seemed to me that I had but closed my eyes when I felt her hand upon my shoulder and heard her soft voice warning me of a new danger. "Arise, O Prince," she whispered. "There be that behind us which has the appearance of the great body of pursuers." The girl stood pointing in the direction from whence we had come, and as I rose and looked, I too thought that I could detect a thin dark line on the far horizon. I awoke the others. Tarstarchus, whom giant stature towered high above the rest of us, could see the farthest. "It is a great body of mounted men," he said, "and they are traveling at high speed." There was no time to be lost. We sprang to our hobbled thoats, freed them, and mounted. Then we turned our faces once more to the north and took our flight again at the highest speed of our slowest beast. For the balance of the day and all the following night, we raced across the ochre wilderness with the pursuers at our back, ever gaining upon us. Slowly but surely, they were lessening the distance between us. Just before dark, they had been close enough for us to plainly distinguish that they were green Martians, and all during the long night we distinctly heard the clanking of their counterments behind us. As the sun rose on the second day of our flight, it disclosed the pursuing horde not a half a mile in our rear. As they saw us, a fiendish shout of triumph rose from their ranks. Several miles in advance lay a range of hills, a farther shore of the Dead Sea we had been crossing. Could we but reach these hills, our chances of escape would be greatly enhanced, but Thuvia's mount, although carrying the lightest burden, already was showing signs of exhaustion. I was riding beside her when suddenly her animal staggered and lurched against mine. I saw that he was going down, but ere he fell, I snatched the girl from his back, swung her into place upon my own thoat behind me, where she clung with her arms about me. This double burden soon proved too much for my already overtaxed beast, and thus our speed was terribly diminished, for the others would proceed no faster than the slowest of us could go. In that little party there was not one who would desert another, yet we were of different countries, different colors, different races, different religions, and one of us was of a different world. We were quite close to the hills, but the Warhoons were gaining so rapidly that we had given up all hope of reaching them in time. Thuvia and I were in the rear, of our beast was lagging more and more. Suddenly I felt the girl's warm lips press a kiss upon my shoulder. "For thy sake, O my prince," she murmured, and then her arms slipped from about my waist and she was gone. I turned and saw that she had deliberately slipped to the ground in the very path of the cruel demons who pursued us, thinking that by lighting the burden of my mount I might thus be enabled to bear me to the safety of the hills. Poor child! She should have known John Carter better than that. Turning my thoat, I urged him after her, hoping to reach her side and bear her on again in our hopeless flight. Carthoris must have glanced behind him in about the same time had taken in the situation, for by the time I had reached Thuvia's side, he was there also, and springing from his mount, he threw her upon its back, and turning the animal's head towards the hills, gave the beast a sharp crack across the rump with the flat end of his sword. Then he attempted to do the same with mine. The brave boy's act was chivalrous self-sacrifice, filled me with pride, nor did I care that it had wrested us from our last frail chance of escape. The Warhoons were now close upon us. Tars Tarkas and Zodar had discovered our absence and were charging rapidly to our support. Everything pointed toward the splendid ending of my second journey to Barsoom. I hated to go without. I hated to go out without having seen my divine princess and held her in my arms once again. But if it were not right upon the book of fate that such was to be, then I would take the most that was coming to me, and in these last few moments that were to be vouchsafed me before I passed over to that unguessed future, I could at least give such an account for myself in my chosen vocation as would leave the Warhoons of the South food for discourse for the next 20 generations. As Carthoris was not mounted, I slipped from my back of my own mount and took my place at his side to meet the charge of the howling devils bearing down upon us. A moment later, Tars Tarkas and Zodar ranged themselves on either hand, turning their throats loose that we might all be on equal footing. The Warhoons were perhaps 100 yards from us when a loud explosion sounded from above and behind us, and almost at the same instant a shell burst in their advancing ranks. At once all was confusion. 100 warriors toppled to the ground. Riderless thoats plunged hither and thither among the dead and dying. Dismounted warriors were trampled underfoot in the stampede which followed. All semblance of order had left the ranks of the green men, and as they looked far above our heads to trace the origin of this unexpected attack, disorder turned to retreat, and retreat to a wild panic. In another moment they were racing as madly away from us as they had been before charging down upon us. We turned to look in the direction from whence the first report had come, and there we saw, just clearing the tops of the nearer hills, a great battleship swinging majestically through the air. Her bow gun spoke again, even as we looked, and another shell burst among the fleeing Warhoons. As she drew nearer, I could not repress a wild cry of elation, for upon her bows I saw the device of helium. What a great way to end! Nice hanging. Do love to depart for the night. Love y'all. Peace. I love you, son. I hope you have a great rest of the night. Heavy D, appreciate you sticking around. What a great way to end. What a great way to end the read with the might of helium coming to their rescue. But now they need to explain how they fought the gods and escaped death, which is supposed to be a big no-no. So we'll see how all that. Yep, chapter 16, under arrest. Yep, see? Great reading as always. I appreciate that. That last chapter, I think I stumbled a little too often in that one, and I apologize. These chapters are mighty long, taking us past our time, but that's all right. I'll always finish the read. Let me take a look right quick and see if there's anybody currently on that we can go and raid. Oh, me neither, Brangus. That was such an incredible part of the story. So many escapes and battles. I can only anticipate where this one is going. Let's see. Red or blue, Pokey Boys, Vicariously, The Hollow Hunters, Price is Right, Jay's Corner, and there's a lot of people still on. There's a lot of people still on. That was a nice read, Kat. I appreciate that, Kara. Appreciate you being here. Got 15 likes tonight. Jay is live. That's where I was going to be heading, just so that we can say hi to the corner and bring our little ghosty reading troop on over. Got 11 of us in here. Let's go and say hello to Jay's Corner. TCG. Seems that he is on the Ascended Heroes SIR hunt. So let's go and say hello and was good sitting with y'all. It was good. It's good having you here, Lolo. I always enjoy when you're around. Um, Off to bed, but nighty night all. Have fun, enjoy your stream. Appreciate you, Kara. I hope you have a great rest of your night. Sleep well. And everybody, I appreciate you all joining me for Monday Relax and Read. Yeah, there are so many people live right now. I don't know if I'm subbed to him, and I don't know why, but I will certainly get on that. But always remember, y'all, go out and get everything that you set out to get, and don't let anything stop you. But take $0 to be a good person. So always do it through peace, love, and Pokemon. And thank you all for believing in ghosts. We will see you next on Thursday. And let's go say hi to Joey, Poke Ghost Raid. And yeah, have a beautiful rest of your night, y'all.